How does Vegas influence fantasy football? Now, if you're anything like me, you see that Vegas is eerily close to a lot of things a lot of the time, but they don't get everything right, and that's to be expected. They're not making all their money by never making a mistake. They will be wrong from time to time. But how come more people don't use Vegas lines when building fantasy football rankings? So in today's show, I'm taking the top 20 overall consensus wide receivers and seeing how Vegas thinks they're gonna finish. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Hopefully everyone is doing well out there today, and today's show is going to be a lot of fun. I really want to start diving into this whole Vegas thing when it comes to fantasy football to try to find out the best correlations. Now, before I get into the content here for today, I do want to take a quick second and thank everyone who has reached out to me over the past couple days after the passing of my dad. Now, technically, it was my father-in-law. It's my wife's dad, but I never had a biological dad growing up. I never met the guy. So for the last 22 years, this man had been my father figure in my life, and it was definitely hard for us to go through this together as a family. That's why I've been out here in Arizona for so long. Yet people have seen the different. I haven't been in my office in quite some time. We have been out here for almost 2 months trying to help him recover from what he was going through. Unfortunately, it just got to be too much for him. So over the last 4 weeks, we were here 24/7 with him, taking care of him on hospice, and he did just pass the other day. It was a very difficult time, and I wanted to thank everyone for hanging in there with me. I know I haven't probably been the funniest or the most entertaining over the last couple weeks, but I've done my best to put on the camera, try to just clear my mind and have a little bit of fun. So thank you once again for all the kind words. Over the last few days, it's really meant a lot to me and my family for sure. But all right, let's get on to some more positive vibes. Jake's not trying to get emotional on camera right now. So let's talk about what we're going to be doing in today's show, because it is going to be a lot of fun, I believe. What I said is we're going to take the top 20 consensus wide receivers as of right now. We're then going to show you what their current lines are in Vegas. What does Vegas project them to do this season? We're then going to take those projections and convert them into half PPR fantasy points. What does that do for us fantasy players? That's great they have a stat line in Vegas, but what does that mean in terms of points when we're building our fantasy football teams? Now, obviously, different sites are going to have different projections slightly, so I tried to find the best average for each player. Now, speaking of average, when you hear the word average, does that define your fantasy football success? Because if it does, you need to get yourself a 2025 fantasy football draft guide. They're already available right now up on our website, tfhdraftguide.com. Now, yes, it's still early in the offseason, which is great. That's why we have a web-based draft guide. We can add to it and we can update it all the way up until week 1 of the NFL season. We have rankings, tier rankings, sleepers, breakouts, busts, injury analysis, offensive line rankings, the perfect draft, and so much more that you will absolutely dominate your draft. So head over to tfhdraftguide.com and get yours right now, because if you don't, your league mates will, and you will be wishing for just average success in fantasy football. Now, there's links down below in the description if you need so after the video. Be sure to check it out. But now let's go ahead and dive into today's show, and let's talk about the top 20 consensus wide receivers and see what Vegas thinks. And we'll go ahead and go through this line by line, and let's go ahead and just start off at the top with the consensus wide receiver 1, Jamar Chase in Cincinnati. No surprise here. Not a lot of changes in this Cincinnati offense. The dude's the returning Triple Crown winner at the position. But let's go ahead and pull up Vegas's projections. Right now, they're sitting right around 114 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 10 touchdowns. If we convert that to half PPR fantasy points, it's enough to be 247 points. So based off of Vegas projections, that would make him also the number 1 overall wide receiver for Vegas as well. So number 1 overall, we have a match. How about number 2? It's Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings. A new year with another quarterback, this time J.J. McCarthy, who is looking great so far this offseason. Now, when we pull up Vegas projections, it shows 104 receptions for 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns. Now that right there would be enough to be 226 half PPR fantasy points and would make him in Vegas the second highest projected wide receiver. So right here at the 1 and 2 spot, the consensus matches Vegas, but that doesn't happen much for the rest of the list. Number 3 in the consensus rankings currently is CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. His Vegas projection is 112 catches for 1,150 yards and 6 touchdowns. Just don't forget that George Pickens is in town, but Dak Prescott should be back. We could be in line for another big-time CeeDee Lamb season. Now, at this projection, it gives him 207 fantasy points and half PPR scoring. That's good enough for Vegas's wide receiver 4 overall. So we do have a 1-spot difference here for CeeDee Lamb. Where the consensus has him at 3, Vegas will have him at 4. Then we go down to the consensus number 4 guy, which is currently Puka Nacua of the Los Angeles Rams. No longer does he have to worry about Cooper Kupp, but now they have Devontae Adams in this offense. So let's go ahead and look at his projection. It's currently right around 104 receptions, 1,200 yards, and 5 touchdowns. That is 202 half PPR fantasy points and would make him the Vegas wide receiver 6 overall. So the consensus has him at 4, Vegas has him at 6, a 2-spot difference. Then we go down to the consensus number 5. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown of the Detroit Lions. He's currently projected in Vegas for right around 107 catches, 1,050 yards, and 8 touchdowns. That's good enough for 206.5 fantasy points in half PPR scoring and would make him the Vegas wide receiver 5. So we have ourselves another match. The consensus number 5 is Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Vegas also has him as the 5th highest projected wide receiver. Now let's move on to the consensus number 6. It's Malik Nabers of the New York Giants. You know I've been talking about him all off season long. He's actually my wide receiver 3 in my rankings here this offseason. I love the improvement at the quarterback position. What does Vegas think, though? They currently have him at 104 catches, 1,150 yards, and 7 touchdowns. That's 209 fantasy points there for Malik Nabers. It would make him the 3rd highest projected wide receiver based on the lines in Vegas. So the overall consensus 6 is actually the wide receiver 3 overall in Vegas, a 3-spot difference. Then we move down to consensus number 7. It's Brian Thomas Jr. of the Jacksonville Jaguars. His current Vegas line is sitting at 86 catches, 1,150 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That is 194 fantasy points and would make him the wide receiver 8 overall when it comes to Vegas projection. So the consensus has him at 7. Vegas will have him at 8, a 1-spot difference. Which then takes us to number 8 in the consensus rankings. It's Nico Collins, and this is where things get a little bit crazy. His current line for Vegas is 85 catches for 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns. That's 178.5 fantasy points and would make him the wide receiver 15 overall in Vegas. That is a 7-spot difference. The consensus has him at 8, but yet Vegas has him as the wide receiver 15. With Diggs gone and Tank Dell done for the season, we really have, Christian Kirk to worry about, maybe some John Mechie. A little bit more John Mechie wouldn't be a bad thing, am I right? But Nico Collins having a 7-spot difference here is a little crazy. How about the consensus wide receiver 9? It's A.J. Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles. His current line is 79 catches for 1,150 yards and 7 touchdowns. That is 196.5 fantasy points and would be enough to make him the wide receiver 7 overall in Vegas, a 2-spot difference. The consensus has him at number 9. We know that Philadelphia is going to run the ball a butt ton, and with multiple weapons in this offense to throw the ball to, I don't think this line is too far off for A.J. Brown. How about the consensus number 10? The halfway spot is Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons. His current line, 89 catches for 1,025 yards and 7 touchdowns. That is 189 fantasy points and would make him the Vegas wide receiver 9 overall. a 1-spot difference. Consensus has him at 10, Vegas has him at 9, and honestly, when I look at that line, I think it may be a little bit low. I wouldn't be surprised if Drake London finishes with even more yards than that. All right, how about number 11 in the consensus rankings? It's Ladd McConkey of the Los Angeles Chargers. His current line is 89 catches for 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, 180.5 fantasy points, and would make him the Vegas wide receiver 14. So a 3-spot difference here for Ladd McConkey. On the consensus side, they got him at 11, Vegas at 14. Now, really, I see him going over 1,000 yards personally. I know this is going to be a run-heavy offense with Omarion Hampton and Najee Harris, but Ladd McConkey is going to be the binky in this offense, and where I see the receptions being pretty close, the yardage wouldn't surprise me if it's closer to 1,100 to 1,150 or so. Then we get down to the consensus number 12. It's Jackson Smith-Njigba of the Seattle Seahawks. His current line, 90 catches for 925 yards and 5 touchdowns. That's 167.5 fantasy points and would make him the Vegas wide receiver 19. This one is a huge difference. The consensus has him at 12. Vegas has him at 19, a 7-spot difference. Now, we know DK Metcalf is gone. We know Tyler Lockett is gone. We know that Geno Smith is gone. It's now Sam Darnold. It's going to be a heavy rushing attack with new offensive coordinator Clint Kubiak. And we got Cooper Kupp now back in his hometown. Sure, he may have a little bit left in the tank, but 925 yards seems a little bit light for me when it comes to Jackson Smith-Njigba. I may split the difference here or so. I think Vegas may have him a little bit too low as of right now. How about number 13 on the consensus side? It's T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. His line, 88 catches for 950 yards and 7 touchdowns. I can get on board with that. That comes out to be 181 fantasy points on the year and would make him the Vegas wide receiver 13. Another match here. More than anything, I think we can just look at T. Higgins and say, yeah, he's a high-end wide receiver too this season. How about the consensus wide receiver 14? It's Tyreek Hill in Miami. His line, 87 catches for only 980 yards and 7 touchdowns. That is 183.5 fantasy points and would make him the Vegas wide receiver 12, a 2-spot difference here for Tyreek Hill. Now, when it comes to Tyreek, I think we all agree. It's going to depend on the health of Tua. If Tua goes out there and plays 17 games, Tyreek Hill is going to straight mushroom stamp this 980-yard line. Now, if Tua were to go down again, yes, I could definitely see a sub-1,000-yard season for Tyreek Hill. He is definitely tied to the health of Tua Tagovailoa. Then we go down to the consensus wide receiver 15. It's Mike Evans in Tampa Bay. His current line, 77 catches for only 880 yards and 7 touchdowns. That's only 168.5 fantasy points and would make him the Vegas wide receiver 18, a 3-spot difference. But here, honestly, I have a hard time saying that Mike Evans is going to lose his 1,000-yard streak this season. Yes, I know they're loaded with weapons. Chris Godwin's going to be coming back from injury. They just drafted Emeka Egbuka. They still got Jalen McMillan and Cade Otton. I understand all of that. But Mike Evans is a big play guy in this offense, and 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns is almost the norm. I think Vegas is a little bit low here on Mike Evans. Then we move down to the consensus wide receiver 16, which is Garrett Wilson of the New York Jets. His current line, 84 catches for 925 yards and 4 touchdowns, which comes out to be 158.5 fantasy points, good enough to make him the Vegas wide receiver 20, so 4 spots lower than the consensus. I understand that Justin Fields may not be some elite passing quarterback in New York. I know they're going to run a lot. They're going to want to play good defense with a new head coach there for the Jets. But Garrett Wilson was getting 1,000 yards receiving with the worst quarterbacks I have ever seen assembled. I really expect him to be over that 1,000-yard mark again this season as well. Then we move down to the wide receiver 17 in consensus rankings. It's Terry McLaurin of the Washington Commandos. His line, 77 catches, 980 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That's 172.5 fantasy points on the season, would make him the Vegas wide receiver 17, so we have another match here with the consensus. Then we move on to the last 3 guys. The first one, the wide receiver 18 on the consensus side, is Davante Adams of now the Los Angeles Rams. His line, 87 catches, 975 yards, 8 touchdowns. That is is 189 fantasy points. Now, if you're paying attention, that 189 number is a lot higher than what you've heard here as of late, and that's because 189 fantasy points would be good enough for him to be the wide receiver 10 overall. That is an 8-spot difference for Davante Adams. Now, here's the crazy part. When you look at that line, 87 for 975 and 8, that seems pretty freaking attainable for Davante Adams in this Los Angeles Rams offense. Yes, he's going to be splitting a lot with Puka Nacua, but there's plenty of offense to go around in LA for Davante Adams to have that season. If his ceiling is top 10, he's an absolute steal on draft day, with the consensus currently having him as the wide receiver 18. Then we move down to the wide receiver 19 on the consensus side. It's DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears. His current line, 88 catches for 1,050 yards and 6 touchdowns. That right there is 185 fantasy points, which would make him the Vegas wide receiver 11. Another guy that has an 8-spot difference. The consensus barely has him inside the top 20, and Vegas is telling us he's a wide receiver 1 up inside the top 12. Now, we know this offense is absolutely stacked in Chicago. There are weapons on weapons on weapons. But 88 for 1,050 and 6 touchdowns is not some crazy line. I could see that happening with DJ Moore. Vegas a little bit higher, and maybe we should be too. But then we round out the top 20 with the consensus wide receiver 20. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. of the Arizona Cardinals. His current line, 83 catches for 925 yards and 7 touchdowns. That is 176 half PPR fantasy points, would make him the Vegas wide receiver 16. A 4-spot difference for the consensus wide receiver 20. Now, I think we can all agree the problem is not Marv. It's the offense in Arizona. It's bland, it's boring, it's vanilla. The dude can't get consistent catchable targets. Now, the crazy thing is when I look at this projection, it's not all over the place, right? 83 catches, very doable, maybe a little bit high. 925 yards receiving, very attainable for him, even in a vanilla offense. Now, the 7 touchdowns, maybe a little bit high for an Arizona Cardinals wide receiver, but it's not crazy. To see that he could be somewhere inside the top 16 could surprise a lot of people in 2025. All right, there you have it. What did you think about the information in today's show? Which player's ranking really kind of caught you off guard? I really wasn't expecting those guys in the consensus 18, 19, 20 spots to be so drastically different in the eyes of Vegas. But I also want to know, who do you think is right, the consensus or Vegas on some of these players? Be sure to leave me a comment down below in the comment section. If you haven't already, do me a favor as well and hit the like button. It greatly helps us out here in the off season on YouTube. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here for the day. Hopefully you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Now, the next time you see me in my next video, I will be back home in my office, so you better be ready for some straight bangers here coming up. Now, hopefully you all enjoy the rest of your day, and most importantly, do your part to make the world a better place.